Greetings. Have you ever considered how much history, how many events, the public never truly learns about because they're deemed too sensitive, too strange, or too dangerous? If the government classified the disappearance of an entire town, what would you suspect they were hiding? Share your thoughts below. The town of Oakhaven had always been the kind of place people drove through, not to. Nestled in a shallow valley in a sparsely populated state, it was a collection of quiet streets, modest homes, a single general store that sold everything from groceries to fishing tackle, a post office, and a small brick-faced town hall. Population fluctuated slightly, usually hovering around 350 souls. It was a community bound by proximity and routine. The Friday night high school football game in the neighboring town, the annual 4th of July picnic by the creek, the shared knowledge of everyone's business, for better or worse. The nearest highway was 20 miles away, accessed by a winding state road that cut through acres of mature oak and pine forest, giving Oakhaven its name. The pace of life was slow, predictable. Nothing much ever happened in Oakhaven, which is precisely why what did happen became so profoundly unsettling and ultimately so deeply buried. It wasn't a town prone to drama or unusual events. Its history, recorded in dusty ledgers at the town hall and the memories of its oldest residents, was one of unremarkable growth, quiet decline, and persistent rural tranquility. The people were ordinary: farmers, retirees, a few young families looking for affordable housing and a peaceful place to raise children, the owner of the general store, the postmistress, the mechanic who ran the only garage on Main Street. They lived their lives in the rhythm of the seasons, connected by faint radio signals and the occasional trip to the larger town an hour's drive away for supplies or medical appointments. There were no major industries, no tourist attractions, nothing that would draw outside attention. It was, by all accounts, a forgotten corner of the country, content in its obscurity. The geography itself contributed to this isolation. The valley wasn't particularly scenic, and the surrounding forests, while extensive, weren't part of any national park or designated wilderness area. They were just woods. The state road was the only real artery connecting Oakhaven to the outside world. Dirt roads branched off from it, leading to scattered farmsteads and cabins. But the core of Oakhaven itself was concentrated around the junction of Main Street and Elm Avenue. On the night of October 27th, the weather reports predicted a typical autumn cold front moving through, maybe some rain later. Residents went to bed, their routines undisturbed, their futures seemingly assured. There was no warning, no tremor, no storm, no sign in the sky. Just a quiet Tuesday night transitioning into a Wednesday morning that would be unlike any other. The first indication that something was wrong didn't come from within Oakhaven. It came from the outside. The first alarm was raised just after dawn on October 28th, not by a resident of Oakhaven, but by Mildred Gable, who lived on a farm 6 miles down the state road, closer to the highway. Mildred usually saw the town's single school bus pass her lane around 7:15 a.m. on its way to pick up the few children scattered on outlying properties before heading into Oakhaven proper. That morning, the bus didn't come. Mildred, a creature of strict habit and a former school secretary, waited 5, 10, 15 minutes. She tried calling the school, then the bus depot. The calls didn't connect. Not a busy signal, not an answering machine. Just a dead line. Assuming the phone lines were down, not uncommon in rural areas during weather changes, she wasn't immediately alarmed. But then her neighbor, Tom Avery, drove by on his way to the lumber mill further up the road, flagged her down, looking perplexed. He said he couldn't get through Oakhaven. The road, he explained, just ended. Or rather, it was there, but it felt wrong. He described a haze and a strange sensation that made him turn back. Mildred, despite her age, was pragmatic. Phone lines down, maybe a fallen tree blocking the road. She got in her reliable old pickup truck and drove towards Oakhaven herself. The further she drove, the quieter it felt. The usual morning sounds of birds or distant farm machinery were absent. As she approached where the Oakhaven town limits sign should have been, she saw what Tom meant. The road was clear, no tree, no obstruction. But the air seemed to shimmer slightly, like heat haze off asphalt, even though it was a cool morning. And beyond where the first houses should have been, there was nothing but an unnerving emptiness. The familiar cluster of buildings was simply gone. It wasn't a crater. It wasn't a pile of rubble. The land was just bare. The road continued into this emptiness for about 50 feet before it, too, seemed to dissolve into the same shimmering non-space. It was as if someone had lifted the town and everything in it clean off the earth, leaving behind only the undisturbed valley floor, covered in a thin, almost imperceptible layer of fine dust. Mildred, shaken, managed to turn her truck around with difficulty, the strange air making her feel disoriented. She drove back to her farm and immediately called the county sheriff's office, bypassing the local Oakhaven number, which she now suspected was useless. Sheriff Brody, a man who dealt mostly with petty theft and minor traffic violations, initially thought it was a prank or a confused elderly woman. But Mildred was insistent, and her description of the road ending and the shimmering air was too specific, too bizarre. He dispatched 2 deputies to investigate, approaching from the other side of town, the route leading from the county seat. Their report, radioed back within the hour, was equally bewildered and disturbing. Negative on town location. Grid reference shows Oakhaven, but there's nothing here, just forest and open ground. Recommend sheriff's presence. This is impossible. Sheriff Brody arrived at the scene around 10 a.m., meeting his 2 deputies, Miller and Jones, at the edge of the bizarre emptiness where Oakhaven should have been. The shimmering effect Mildred and Tom had described was still faintly visible, a distortion in the air that seemed to blur the trees in the distance. Brody, a veteran officer nearing retirement, had seen a lot in his career, but nothing like this. He walked gingerly onto the ground where Main Street should have been. It felt solid underfoot, like ordinary earth, but there was that thin layer of fine gray dust over everything. There was no debris, no indication of an explosion, fire, or collapse. It was as if the town had been surgically removed. Houses, businesses, cars, people, all gone. Miller, looking pale, pointed to where the general store, owned by old Mr. Henderson, should have stood. I bought gas there last week, Sheriff. Right there. And now, nothing. Jones was running a Geiger counter he'd brought from the patrol car, more out of habit than expectation. It registered only normal background radiation. There were no strange smells, no residual heat, just silence, broken only by the wind whispering through the surrounding forest and the anxious breathing of the 3 men. Brody tried his radio, calling for backup, state police, anyone. His signal was weak, cutting in and out, unusual for this location. He decided they needed to establish a perimeter and wait for reinforcements. They marked the edges of the affected area with police tape, a futile gesture against the enormity of the absence. News travels fast, even in rural areas, particularly when official vehicles are seen congregating near something inexplicable. By late morning, a few curious locals from neighboring farms, alerted by Mildred or word of mouth, began to gather at the edge of the cordon. Their initial reactions ranged from disbelief to fear. "Where's the town?" someone shouted, their voice cracking. "What happened to the Hendersons? The Millers?" Sheriff Brody, despite his own bewilderment, tried to maintain order, telling people to stay back, that it was an active scene. Though active with what? He couldn't say. He prevented anyone from entering the cleared area. Within a couple of hours, state police cruisers began arriving, their officers' initial skepticism quickly turning to stunned silence as they witnessed the impossible void. A state police captain, a stern woman named Captain Eva Rostova, took charge, her face grim. She immediately recognized the unprecedented nature of the situation and made calls higher up the chain of command. The atmosphere shifted. What started as a local mystery quickly escalated into something far larger, far more serious. The police cordon was reinforced. A helicopter arrived, circling the area, its occupants presumably seeing the same incomprehensible blankness from above. As the afternoon wore on, the civilian onlookers were politely but firmly told to leave. The road was blocked off miles away in both directions. Military vehicles, unmarked black SUVs, and personnel in dark, unidentifiable uniforms began to arrive. The state police were still present, but they were being rapidly supplanted by these new arrivals. Questions were deflected. Information stopped flowing. By nightfall on October 28th, less than 24 hours after Oakhaven vanished, the perimeter around the empty valley had become a heavily guarded military exclusion zone. The official response had gone from local bewilderment to state-level emergency to a full-blown, high-security federal operation. And the first layers of secrecy were already being put in place. As the military presence solidified around the former location of Oakhaven, information became increasingly scarce and tightly controlled. Captain Rostova and the state police officers who were among the first on the scene found themselves quickly sidelined, their initial reports and observations absorbed into the opaque structure of the federal investigation. They were instructed not to speak to the press or the public about what they had seen, beyond a brief, non-committal statement about an unexplained incident requiring federal assistance. Sheriff Brody, whose jurisdiction Oakhaven technically fell under, was equally shut out. He made multiple attempts to get answers, to understand what had happened to the people he knew, the town he served. His calls went unanswered, or he was met with polite but firm refusals to disclose any details, citing national security protocols. This immediate clampdown fueled intense speculation among those who had witnessed the initial chaos and the rapid militarization of the site. Rumors spread like wildfire through the surrounding communities. A secret military experiment gone wrong, a meteor strike leaving no trace, something supernatural. For the families of Oakhaven residents who lived outside the immediate area, sons and daughters who had moved away, distant cousins, friends, the silence was agonizing. They called the sheriff's office, the state police, emergency hotlines, getting nowhere. Official statements were vague to the point of being meaningless, confirming only that Oakhaven was inaccessible due to an ongoing investigation into an unspecified event. There was no mention of disappearances, no explanation of the empty space. This lack of information was devastating. People arrived at the roadblocks, desperate for news of their loved ones, only to be turned away by armed guards who offered no comfort or explanation. The raw grief and confusion of these families clashed starkly with the cold, efficient anonymity of the military operation taking place behind the cordon. Local reporters who attempted to get close were quickly escorted away, their questions ignored. The few who managed to file initial reports based on early witness accounts like Mildred Gables found their stories attracting national attention. But the official silence and lack of further verifiable information made sustained coverage difficult. Within days, the narrative in the national press began to shift, steered by the lack of official confirmation and the sheer impossibility of the event. It became a strange, unsolved local mystery, quickly overshadowed by other news cycles. But for those closer to Oakhaven, the reality of the vanished town and its missing residents was a persistent, horrifying void. A small task force was eventually established, or perhaps publicly acknowledged, to handle inquiries from the families. It was based miles away, in a government building in the state capital, and proved to be a bureaucratic maze offering little genuine assistance or information. Standard procedures for locating missing persons were useless. There were no traces to follow, no crime scene in the conventional sense. The families were left in limbo, officially acknowledged as victims of an unexplained event, but with no bodies, no cause of death, and no understanding of what had occurred. The government's primary focus was clearly not on finding the people or explaining the event to the public, but on containing the information and controlling access to the site. The rapid classification and subsequent information blackout surrounding the Oakhaven incident naturally led to a proliferation of theories. Before the government fully locked down the narrative, snippets of information, observations from the initial responders, and local speculation circulated, providing fertile ground for alternative explanations. One prevalent theory, particularly among those who had noticed subtle changes in the area leading up to the disappearance, involved unusual geological activity. Some residents in the wider valley had reported minor tremors in the weeks prior, more frequent than usual. Others spoke of strange, low-frequency sounds that seemed to emanate from the earth. Could Oakhaven have been built on a previously unknown or unstable geological feature? Could a localized, perhaps instantaneous geological event have occurred, somehow causing the town to collapse or sink into the earth? While plausible for a structure collapse, it didn't explain the clean removal of the town, the lack of a crater, or the absence of debris. Another line of speculation leaned towards the possibility of a clandestine military or scientific experiment. The immediate arrival and takeover by federal agencies, coupled with the intense secrecy, certainly pointed in this direction. What kind of experiment could make an entire town vanish? Was it some advanced form of camouflage, teleportation, or a weapon test gone catastrophically wrong? This theory gained traction when rumors circulated about unusual energy readings detected by early responders. Before the site was fully secured and swept, some whispered about odd atmospheric phenomena observed in the sky above Oakhaven in the nights leading up to the 27th. Strange lights, unnatural cloud formations. These reports were quickly dismissed or attributed to misidentification or imagination by official sources, but they persisted in local folklore. A more outlandish, though perhaps understandable given the circumstances, theory involved extraterrestrial activity. The sudden, inexplicable disappearance of an entire community with no physical trace fit the pattern of some abduction scenarios, albeit on a massive scale. The shimmering air effect, the feeling of disorientation reported by early witnesses, could these be related to advanced alien technology? This theory, while popular in some circles, was difficult to reconcile with the government's intense interest and classification. Why cover up an alien event with military secrecy unless the military was directly involved or knew more than they were letting on? Regardless of the specifics, the persistent thread running through all these theories was the understanding that the official narrative, or lack thereof, was deliberately obscuring the truth. The speed and thoroughness with which the site was sealed, the official silence, the sidelining of local authorities, All of it indicated that whatever happened in Oakhaven was not just an accident or a natural disaster. It was something the authorities understood, at least in part, and deemed necessary to hide from the public eye. The why behind the classification was as significant as the event itself, suggesting the truth was not merely tragic, but dangerous, or perhaps revealed something about capabilities or phenomena the public was not meant to know existed. For people like Mark Jenkins, a freelance investigative journalist based in the state capital, the Oakhaven incident became an obsession. He saw the immediate government lockdown not just as an impediment to reporting, but as confirmation that there was a significant story being deliberately suppressed. Mark had a reputation for pursuing leads the mainstream media often ignored, particularly those involving government overreach or unexplained phenomena. He began by trying to contact the initial responders, Sheriff Brody, Captain Rostova, the deputies, the state troopers. He found them largely unwilling or unable to speak. Brody was clearly frustrated but tight-lipped, citing ongoing investigations he wasn't privy to. Rostova had been transferred to a different district shortly after the Oakhaven event, a move she quietly indicated was not voluntary. Attempts to access official reports through Freedom of Information Act requests were met with boilerplate rejections, citing national security and ongoing investigations, standard tactics for indefinite stonewalling. Undeterred, Mark started interviewing people in the surrounding areas. Mildred Gable, Tom Avery, the families of the missing residents. He gathered their fragmented accounts, their confusion, their grief, and their shared sense of betrayal by the authorities. He learned about the strange tremors and sounds some had noticed, the faint, unconfirmed reports of atmospheric anomalies. He spoke to truck drivers who regularly used the state road, some of whom described their GPS systems behaving erratically near Oakhaven in the days before the disappearance. Slowly, painstakingly, Mark began to piece together a picture that differed significantly from the official non-information. He heard rumors of scientists in hazmat suits seen at the site in the first few days, of unusual equipment being brought in under cover of darkness. He spoke to a former state trooper who, anonymously, described the intense pressure applied to anyone who had been near the site early on to sign non-disclosure agreements. The message was clear: forget what you saw. Never talk about it. Mark realized that getting information from official channels was impossible. His focus shifted to finding someone, anyone, who had been involved in the initial federal response. Before the complete information lockdown, someone with a conscience or a reason to speak out. He chased down leads about disgruntled former employees, contractors who might have worked on the site, even rumors of low-level military personnel who had been present. This was dangerous work, involving meeting sources in darkened parking lots, communicating through encrypted channels, and constantly looking over his shoulder. He knew his inquiries were likely being monitored. The classification wasn't just about hiding information. It was actively protecting a secret. The scale of the cover-up suggested whatever happened in Oakhaven was not a mistake to be corrected, but perhaps a consequence of something deliberate, something that revealed capabilities or vulnerabilities the government could not afford to become public knowledge. Mark felt increasingly certain that the truth of Oakhaven was tangled up in advanced technology, possibly related to energy, space-time, or dimensional physics, and that the town's disappearance was an unforeseen side effect of research that was still ongoing or had simply been moved elsewhere. What, precisely, did the initial, classified investigation into Oakhaven reveal that necessitated such extreme secrecy? While official reports remained sealed tighter than a drum, fragmented accounts and speculation based on the nature of the subsequent government actions offer compelling clues. One of the most persistent rumors, stemming from hushed conversations among early, non-federal responders before the gag order was absolute, involved unusual energy signatures detected at the site. These weren't just elevated radiation levels, which were explicitly ruled out by the few public statements made early on. Instead, reports hinted at readings that didn't conform to known forms of energy, perhaps fluctuating electromagnetic fields of unprecedented intensity, or signatures suggestive of exotic particles or energies interacting with local space-time. Early observations reportedly noted strange effects on electronic equipment near the perimeter, compasses spinning wildly, radio communications distorting or failing entirely, sensitive scientific instruments giving erratic readings. This aligns with theories suggesting an experiment involving manipulating fundamental forces. Another key element speculated to be part of the classified findings is evidence of anomalous environmental changes, localized precisely to the Oakhaven footprint. While the ground itself appeared undisturbed, some reports, impossible to verify publicly, suggested microscopic or subatomic alterations to the soil composition or the air within the vanished zone. There were also whispers of biological anomalies. Trees and plant life immediately surrounding the cleared area showing strange patterns of growth or decay, or small animals exhibiting unusual behavior or physiological changes. If true, this would indicate not just a physical removal of the town, but a profound, perhaps temporary alteration of the very fabric of reality within that space. Furthermore, the immediate seizure and likely suppression of personal effects and potentially even residual energy readings or environmental samples by the federal teams suggests they found something. It wasn't a clean slate left behind. There were subtle, yet highly significant clues that pointed towards a specific, non-natural cause. The nature of the classified protocols implemented, not typical disaster response but security protocols associated with sensitive research facilities or crash sites involving advanced technology, strongly suggests that whatever happened was not accidental in its origin, even if the outcome was unintended. It implies the government recognized the phenomena involved, possibly even understood its theoretical basis, and classified it not just to prevent panic, but to protect the knowledge or technology behind it. The enduring classification, decades later, points to the possibility that the understanding gained from Oakhaven is still relevant to ongoing research, or that the implications of the event, perhaps proving the feasibility of certain exotic technologies or revealing dangerous unknown phenomena, are simply too significant to ever enter the public domain. Oakhaven isn't just a mystery of disappearance. It's a testament to the lengths governments will go to control information about capabilities that redefine what is possible. The vanished town of Oakhaven remains, officially, an unresolved mystery, a cold case filed away under layers of national security classification. Decades have passed since that October night, but the site remains off-limits, a heavily monitored exclusion zone surrounded by fences and warning signs about trespassing and restricted access. The landscape within the former town limits has changed little over time, seemingly untouched by the natural processes of erosion or vegetative overgrowth that would typically reclaim abandoned land. The thin layer of grey dust reportedly found by the first responders has long since dissipated or been removed, but the ground retains an unnatural quality, a subtle resistance to the encroachment of nature, as if the very earth remembers the absence. For the families of the approximately 350 residents of Oakhaven, the classification has turned grief into a perpetual state of limbo. There are no graves to visit, no official explanations for what happened to their mothers, fathers, children, friends. They are officially listed as missing, victims of an unexplained event, but without closure. Some families have faded away, the younger generations moving on, unable to bear the weight of the unresolved tragedy. Others have continued to quietly advocate for answers, forming small, informal groups that meet in secret. sharing information gleaned from unreliable sources, holding onto faded photographs, refusing to let the world forget that their loved ones simply ceased to exist overnight. Their efforts to gain access to classified files or receive official updates have been met with consistent, polite, but firm rejection. The government task force initially set up has long since been disbanded, replaced by an anonymous office that handles inquiries with bureaucratic detachment. Mark Jenkins, the investigative journalist, never published a definitive exposé on Oakhaven, despite years of digging. He wrote several articles detailing the cover-up and the plight of the families, but the core mystery of how and why remained elusive, buried beneath too many layers of official secrecy and lack of verifiable evidence. He compiled extensive notes, witness testimonies, and leaked rumors, a file he keeps locked away, a testament to a truth he couldn't fully uncover. The enduring classification isn't just about hiding what happened in Oakhaven. It's about controlling the narrative surrounding the possibility of such events occurring. It suggests that the knowledge gained from the incident, whether it involves advanced energy manipulation, interdimensional physics, or something else entirely beyond current public understanding, is considered a strategic asset or a profound vulnerability that cannot be revealed. The silence surrounding Oakhaven is a deliberate act of state control, a calculated decision to prioritize national security or technological advantage over public knowledge and the closure of grieving families. The vanished town serves as a stark, physical reminder that the world contains phenomena and capabilities that remain firmly outside the realm of public discourse, hidden behind walls of classification. The persistent, impenetrable veil of classification over the Oakhaven incident isn't merely about preventing panic or avoiding public outcry over an unknown event. It speaks to something far more fundamental about the nature of what was potentially discovered or demonstrated that night. If Oakhaven had been destroyed by a natural disaster, even an unusual one, the response would have been disaster relief, investigation, and eventual scientific study, with findings potentially shared to prevent future occurrences. If it were a standard military accident, there would likely be official inquiries, compensation for victims, and explanations, however sanitized. The Oakhaven protocol was different from the outset. It was immediate containment, evidence suppression, and total information control. This suggests the incident revealed something about reality itself, or about human capabilities to interact with it, that is deemed too significant or too dangerous for public knowledge. Consider the possibilities hinted at by the fragmented rumors: exotic energy signatures, localized space-time distortions, inexplicable removal of mass without conventional force. These aren't just strange occurrences. They touch upon principles that underpin physics and could potentially lead to revolutionary or devastating technologies. If Oakhaven was the result of an experiment, failed or otherwise, involving advanced energy generation, manipulation of gravity or dimensions, or some form of localized reality alteration, then the classification serves multiple purposes. It protects the proprietary nature of the technology or knowledge involved, potentially a closely guarded secret with immense military or strategic implications. It hides the fact that such capabilities with potentially catastrophic side effects like the Oakhaven incident even exist or are being pursued. It also prevents public understanding of phenomena that could challenge established scientific paradigms or reveal vulnerabilities in our understanding of the universe. Furthermore, the classification may be ongoing because the investigation into why Oakhaven vanished is still active, albeit in highly secretive channels. The site may still be a subject of remote sensing or covert monitoring, searching for residual energies or lingering effects. The data gathered in the immediate aftermath, whatever it was, could be under continuous analysis by top-tier scientists and researchers. The classification, therefore, is not a historical footnote. It is an active state of containment for a secret that is still considered vital to national security, possibly related to ongoing research and development in fields that remain decades, if not centuries, ahead of public knowledge. The town of Oakhaven didn't just vanish. Its disappearance became evidence of a hidden truth, a truth so profound and potentially disruptive that the government decided it was better for an entire community to be erased from existence and memory than for the world to know what truly occurred. The classification isn't just a cover-up of an event. It's the preservation of a secret about the nature of power and possibility in the modern world. The enduring mystery of Oakhaven is a stark reminder of the limits of public knowledge when confronted with the interests of state security and classified research. For those outside the affected area, it has faded into a strange, unbelievable anecdote, a modern myth. For the families, it remains an open wound, a life sentence of uncertainty and grief. For the government entities involved, it is a success story of information control, a demonstration of their ability to make an entire town disappear from the public record as effectively as it disappeared from the map. The reasons behind the initial disappearance may forever be debated in hushed tones and online forums, but the why of the classification is perhaps the more accessible, albeit unsettling, truth. It was classified because whatever happened in Oakhaven was not supposed to happen, but more importantly, the knowledge of how it happened, or the capabilities it revealed, was deemed too powerful, too dangerous, or too strategically valuable to ever reach the public domain. The official silence serves as a shield, protecting not just the details of that single night, but the potential implications for future research, technological development, and the global balance of power. The exclusion zone around the former site is more than just a physical barrier. It's a symbol of the boundary between the world the public inhabits and the hidden realities explored behind closed doors by scientists and military strategists. The story of Oakhaven, or the lack thereof in official records, underscores a fundamental tension in modern society: the public's right to know versus the government's perceived need for secrecy in the name of security or progress. It forces us to confront the possibility that significant events, potentially world-altering in their implications, could occur and be deliberately erased from collective consciousness. The town that vanished overnight didn't just take its buildings and people with it. It took a piece of observable reality, replacing it with a void of official silence and unanswered questions. And that silence, that void, is precisely why the file on Oakhaven remains sealed, a chilling testament to secrets buried deeper than any town could sink. What truly lies beneath the classification isn't just the story of Oakhaven's end, but potentially the story of capabilities that redefine the known world, capabilities deemed too important to ever be understood by the people who live in it. The vanished town is a ghost in the machine of state secrecy, a persistent echo of an event that proves some truths are not only stranger than fiction, but actively hidden from view. The legacy of Oakhaven is not found in history books or public memorials. It is etched into the lives of the few surviving family members who refuse to forget, and whispered in conspiracy theories that circulate on the fringes of the internet. It is also ingrained in the protocols of secrecy and information control employed by various agencies, refined and reinforced by the successful suppression of the Oakhaven truth. The site itself, guarded and inaccessible, remains a silent monument to an unknown event. The land where houses stood and children played is now just an empty patch, periodically monitored by unseen technology, a constant reminder of the limits of our understanding and the power of the state to define reality. The question posed at the beginning lingers. If an entire town can vanish and be classified, what else remains hidden? The techniques perfected in the Oakhaven cover-up, the immediate military lockdown, the silencing of witnesses, the bureaucratic stonewalling of inquiries, the strategic leaking of misdirection or vague non-denials, have become blueprints for managing other sensitive incidents, ensuring that fewer and fewer events leave discernible traces in the public record. The story of Oakhaven is less about how a town disappeared, and more about how the truth of that disappearance was handled. It demonstrates that in the hierarchy of state interests, public transparency and the closure of its citizens rank far below the preservation of certain secrets. The town's fate serves as a chilling hypothetical made real. What would the government hide? And what are they capable of hiding? If the truth involves phenomena or technologies that could alter national security, scientific understanding, or the public's perception of what is possible, Oakhaven is not just a place that vanished. It's a concept, a symbol of the unknown and the deliberately obscured. The classification wasn't just about containing the event. It was about containing the implications. It's about the fact that some doors of knowledge, once opened, are deemed too dangerous to leave ajar for the public gaze. And the enduring silence surrounding that empty valley is the loudest statement of all, confirming that the real reason Oakhaven is still classified is because the truth is not meant for us to know.